It's not uncommon for a popular film to receive a toy line, and in the 80s that was even more so. It was equally as common for an animated series to be created. But this one's a little different. See, this one pretended the animated series was the real story and that the Hollywood movie was actually created around that. Weird, I know, but I loved both properties. And the toys, well, they're some of my favorites to collect still today. This is Rewind Toys. I'm Jason Emmett, and today we're going to tell you all about the Real Ghostbusters. All right, so Ghostbusters hit the big screen in 1984, and it quickly became a fan favorite film. Written by Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd, it was a sci-fi comedy action masterpiece, and it earned an extremely hefty profit. It was a cultural phenomenon, and I'm sure Columbia Pictures was looking for a way to further cash in on that success, but how do you go about that? The movie was chock full of adult themes and inappropriate humor, and I, as a kid, loved it, but it would be difficult to market that to kids, so why not make a cartoon? And so they did. They made a cartoon, and then everyone lived happily ever after. Only that wouldn't be much fun to talk about, now would it? There were legal issues and cartoon confusion, a weird but fun storyline shift, and so much more. But let's start with the legal issues. Now, maybe you didn't know this, but the Ghostbusters found their start on television in a 1975 sitcom. You can find it online and you can watch it, and right away you're going to say to yourself, what the
Nope.
is this? And that show ran 15 episodes. Featured a trio of slapstick detectives, one of which was a gorilla. A gorilla. Anyway, they investigated paranormal occurrences a la Scooby-Doo. Rights to the show belonged to Universal Studios and to Filmation. Enter 1983, when a film about a group of 3 ghost-catching individuals was pitched to Columbia Pictures. The film, which was written by Aykroyd, would also star him. It would also star John Belushi and Eddie Murphy. It was a scary action film set in the future. Now, Aykroyd and Ramis wanted Ivan Reitman to direct, and they wanted to call it Ghostbusters. The only problem was, well, like I said, Universal Studios owned the rights to Ghostbusters. Other names were considered. There was Ghost Breakers, Ghost Stoppers, but none of them really felt right, and so they decided they just needed to buy the name rights from Universal, which they did. They agreed on $600,000 and 1% of the film's profits. Now, that 1% would never actually end up getting paid. There's some fancy accounting thing that made it the film technically didn't earn a profit. It's Hollywood, right? Now, obviously, a lot happened to change everything we just talked about. There was the unfortunate death of John Belushi. Eddie Murphy declined the film to instead star in Beverly Hills Cop. And, of course, there were significant rewrites and story changes, but we finally received our version of the film in June of 1984. And yes, all of this is important to the next bit, the cartoon. So Filmation sees the success of the Ghostbusters movie, and they realize they have the rights to the name in cartoon form, and so they offer their services to Columbia Pictures. But Columbia Pictures was like, hey, no thank you. We're going to work with Deke. So Filmation, they're like, well, fine, we're going to create our own version based off the 1975 property. So they did, and actually released it a few days before Deke released their cartoon. The thing is, Deke can't use Ghostbusters for the cartoon, not now, and so they had to change it. And they did, to the Real Ghostbusters. This was smart for 2 reasons. The first was it let everyone know they were the cartoon. They were the real one, the one based off the movie. And 2, because, well, they were about to change the storyline. Sort of. The Real Ghostbusters cartoon changed the characters' appearances slightly, shifting their hair color and uniforms a bit, just to, help separate them. Similar to how they changed the Turtles' colors from all red to red, orange, purple, and blue to help tell them apart in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Then they gave us episode 2 of the cartoon. That was the episode called Take 2. Now, this made it so the cartoon was the real timeline and that the 1984 film had been based on the cartoon instead of the other way around. This was a genius move because it allowed for changes made in the series to not affect the movie's continuity and vice versa. So the cartoon landed in 1986, and like the film, it was a huge hit. It ended up running 7 seasons, with a name change in season 4 to Slimer and the Real Ghostbusters. The cartoon also allowed for toys. Hey guys, if you're watching this, and if you occasionally watch this, maybe you do me a favor, go down, slap that thumbs up button, and hit the subscribe button. It helps us out a whole bunch. It like boosts us in these weird YouTube algorithms that nobody can quite figure out, and we really appreciate it because we love having you here. We love talking toys. That's it, guys. Now back to the show. In 1988, the Real Ghostbusters helped generate over $200 million in revenue by itself. The toy line, which was produced by Kenner, ran from 1986 to 1991. Kenner really wanted this toy line, and they knew it was imperative that they release their toys before Filmation, so they pulled in designer Alton Takayasu, who had been working on another cool line, the Centurions. Wanting to get the figures out fast, they were worried about, getting too complex with their designs, and to me this sort of worked in their favor. The figures were great counterparts for the series, and the limited articulation meant they stood and displayed really well. Their shoulders moved, their heads moved, and their legs moved, and that was pretty much it. But Kenner didn't skimp on the quality. The molds, the colors, the feel, they were perfect. Each of the 4 Busters came with a proton pack and a ghost figure, and I loved them, immediately. Now, also tested early on were the Fright feature figures, which have become a staple in the Ghostbusters line. Here you get a feel for what they are. Now, our first wave was made up of Zedmore, Venkman, Spangler, and Stantz. There was also the Green Ghost, who later would be named Slimer. There was the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and there were plushies of both the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and Slimer. Oh, and the Ghost Zapper. Wave 2 hit the shelves the following year and heavily expanded on the ghosts, giving us figures like Bad to the Bone, H2 Ghost, and one of my favorites, Bug-Eye. It's also when we got the Ecto-1, Ectoplasm, and the Ghost Popper, and yes, I have several of these toys on my shelf currently. The third wave is when the infamous Fright features were released, as well as the Firehouse and the Proton Pack, which is so awesome. Fourth wave gave us a bunch more ghosts and the Haunted Humans line, and also gave us our first Janine figure. There was a fifth wave that gave us the Monster series and more vehicles, and then we had a 6th, a 7th, an 8th, a 9th, and a 10th wave of toys, and there are just way too many of them for me to list, but you get the idea. There were also several unreleased playsets and figures. We actually talked about one here on the show in that episode up there. You can check it out. That's our prototype episode. Really cool one. Go over, watch that when you're done with this. Okay, so it was the Ghostbusters. So, of course, there was so much merch produced. It would be super difficult to hit it all. I mean, there was cereal, there was Play-Doh, there were watches, stickers, coloring books, and you guys would probably attack me if I didn't mention the Hi-C Ecto coolers. In 2020, Hasbro re-released a number of the figures using the original sculpts and box art. Now, I own the original figures loose, and I have a set of the Hasbro re-release carded because, well, I love the toys, and I don't have hundreds of dollars. You get it, right? Because if you got the old ones on card, they're hundreds of dollars. I've seen them. They're a lot. There are some slight differences to look for from the originals and the re-release. Of course, the Hasbro stamp on the back of the box is the big one. The colors are just a smidge different. The Proton Pack clip has been changed, meaning the new packs won't fit the old figures, which is a bummer. But little differences. Some of the ghosts, I actually think the new ghosts look a little cooler, but mild differences, nothing too over the top. But if you find a figure and you're wanting to know if it's an original or a re-release, kind of look for these things. I will also mention there was a Ghostbusters video game that did come out with the movie. It was first released for home computers, and then later additional platforms like Atari 2600, Commodore 64, and the NES. I played these games. They were hard. The Real Ghostbusters is one of my favorite toy lines ever produced, maybe because I was the perfect age. According to a Kenner survey, boys between the age of 6 and 11 were the ones most interested, and I was like 10 years old when these came out. Or maybe it was just because they're really great toys connected to a great film franchise and an amazing cartoon. The Real Ghostbusters is one of a few lines I collect extensively. But how about you guys? Do any of you out there have a Ghostbusters toy collection? If so, let me know in the comments. And until next time, remember, when it comes to these fun franchise toys, well, the hunt is still half the fun.